Jen's going to tell us a little bit about a process and the benefits of having a list for things you want and things you don't want, right, Janet?
Yeah, I think one of the most basic things that when we go through some sort of change in our life is, and I know that everybody has said this before, wow, I just really don't like doing that, or I don't want to do this anymore. And Barbara and Mia know that I am the queen, that if they say something like that, I'm like, catch that. What's the action step that goes along with it? And I know I drive everybody nuts. But if you say that and you don't record it and you keep repeating the pattern, you're just like, it's just not helpful, right? At some point, it's not helpful anymore. So that's why I have I want and a don't want list. And I make mine. And sometimes I just keep it running and going, even if I just use my phone to go, oh, I just said I don't want to do that anymore. Let me capture that and make sure. But I revisit mine every 6 months or so to see how it's changed. And things that are on my want and don't want list, I have 3 things on my don't want list: to compromise myself, to live paycheck to paycheck, that's not good, and to be financially dependent on someone else. That's all that's on my don't want list right now. My want list literally is 2 pages of, it's a back and front of a notebook paper. When you start writing your want list, it's like, oh, I want that. I want that too. I want that too. I want that too. And so it just helps you kind of get a little clarity. And when you feel out of control in a situation that happened to you that you didn't have any control over, whether it was through a sudden job loss or, I don't know, a major change in a relationship. It could be a number of things that are those jarring events. Just going back and revisiting that want and don't want list, I think, is pretty helpful. And it could be anything. It could be relationship, employer. It could be, and when I say employer and then I say job, I mean, what kind of company are you working for? If you love your job, but you don't like that kind of company, that needs to go on the don't want list, or the opposite of needs to go on your want list. Habits. How many times have we said, wow, I really wish that I would do X, Y, Z? Well, then put that on your want list, right? It could be where you live. I don't know. What's on yours, Barbara?
Well, I tell you that health is a huge one for me, just focusing on that and then breaking that down. And we've talked about that a little bit before. I have to have some kind of rigorous structure to my health and I have to do it first thing in the morning. I love to get up super early and exercise so that I can check that off the box, and it makes me feel good and it gives me energy for the rest of the day. So one thing that I always want is to be healthy. And so to do that includes food, and it includes like your nutrition and exercise, getting some fresh air. And one thing I've not been good at over the years is exercising like after work. I just like it never fits in, or I'm too tired, or I think of something like, maybe I should eat some nachos and instead of go for a walk, which is really rare, but I do enjoy that. So I think in terms of other ways to think about it, like what want and don't want, and you have such a great system, Janet, for like a structure for the journal. And think of it maybe like you could make different buckets for this, for your wants and don't wants list. So like, how do you want to feel? So mine, I kind of gave some examples, but maybe you don't want to feel exhausted, like you always feel exhausted. So you can't just think that away, right? You have to take some steps. So think about, if you don't want to feel exhausted, or maybe if you were on the corporate treadmill, or, you've got family responsibilities or whatever, what things can you do so that you don't feel exhausted? What steps should you take? Another list could be like, I want to have, so maybe in your life, what do you want to have? Like, one thing that I value is having friends that I can trust. They're like gold, and they make your life so much richer. And I spent some time with some friends on Saturday, and I texted Janet and I said it was as good for the exercise as it was for the soul. Us girls, it's good to get together and vent and share. So one thing that I like to have in my life is friends I can trust. I think another thing is a job that I like, or work that's meaningful. I think that's so important, because that really rounds out like who we are, and feeling like we're making a difference. And And I think back to when I worked for American Airlines, and I really was responsible for the income for our family, which is a huge burden when you think of you've got 4 people on your shoulders. Um, and when the unions would strike, because I was non-union, it was completely out of my control what happened to my job. Like if they had layoffs because the ramp union struck, or because the flight attendants struck and they had to lay off people, there was nothing I could do about that. No matter what level of performance I had, that was completely out of my control. So I didn't ever want to be in that situation again where I couldn't take control of kind of my work. And then the last one I would say in terms of buckets is what things I want to achieve, right? So what's that saying, Janet? Like when you targets, things that get measured get done, right?
Mm.
So what do you want to achieve? And so set some goals for yourself. One could be this notion of kind of a quality of work-life blend. Like, so maybe it's not, it's not just a quality of work life. We know it's over the years has certainly blurred that line, right? Which for better or worse, work and personal life has gotten more blurry. So what is it what's that balance or that blend that's going to make you happy? I love my work. And so I'm comfortable working more hours because I get so much joy out of it. And then the last thing I would say is things that I want to achieve as a legacy. I want to feel like in my career, in my role as a mom, in my role as a daughter, sister, that I'm leaving some kind of a legacy, that I've made a difference along the way. So I think maybe that might be some helpful examples, but back to you on that one.
I want everybody to maybe, if you guys have something that's on your want and your don't want list, it could be something funny. Like, I don't want to eat nachos at 10 o'clock anymore. I don't know. I love nachos, but I don't allow myself to have them. I just allowed sweets back in my house since March. I went to Trader Joe's last week and I got a little thing of their pistachio gelato. It's so good. Anyway, I don't want to eat half a carton of pistachio gelato at 10 o'clock before I go to bed. No. But in all seriousness, I like, Barbara, where you were talking about putting an action word. When you put an action word in front of something, it completely changes the other end of that. So if I say, I want, to do, or I want to have, or whatever those to do, to haves, to eat, to love, I want to love XYZ, or whatever those things are. I think that it helps almost reframe the want and don't want list into something that is a little bit more tangible, because you start satisfying those things inside of you that maybe you have knocked down for a while, and it's time to bring them up, because now's a great time to do it. And when I say bring them up, I mean address them. Like, really say, you know what, you're right. I have squashed that down, and what's the top of my don't want list is to ever compromise myself again, and compromise what I want and need in my life. And I will never do that again. And I've done it for too long. And just like, that's why it's at the top of my list. And it kind of gives you a, not like a litmus test, like a yardstick, I guess, for you, like measuring against your wants and don't wants. And it just becomes just kind of a nice little list for you to go back to and remind yourself of those things that when you did sit down and get quiet and you made that list and it really came from your heart, that maybe that is your true self talking. And it's a good way to, as a guidepost, to just kind of like guide you along. So, I hope that you guys will take that and maybe make your want and don't want list and share some of them this week. You have to share all of them, but a few of them, especially if you want to be held accountable for something, like Mia did for me this morning when she had heard that I needed an accountability buddy to get out of my house and exercise. And so we went for a really early morning paddle this morning. It was awesome. And now my exercise is out of the way for the day.